Are you curious about how and when Ukraine is launching its counteroffensive against Russian occupation? As tensions continue to escalate in the region, geopolitical strategist Peter Zeihan has provided insights on Ukraine's upcoming counterattack, highlighting its air defense capabilities, potential targets, and plans for the offensive. But how accurate are Zeihan's predictions, and how realistic is Ukraine's plan for reclaiming its territory? In this video, I'll delve deeper into Zeihan's analysis and evaluate the feasibility of Ukraine's upcoming counteroffensive. So first, listen to Peter Zeihan, then I will be providing a critical review of his analysis and discuss the rationality of his opinions. Let's dive in.
The Ukrainians appear to be nearly ready. They've brought in a lot of weaponry, all the battle tanks that NATO has promised are there, and they've even trained up on a few jets that have been donated. They can't move yet, and so it's probably going to be the last week of May or into June when things finally dry out. That's just kind of traditionally when the spring mud season ends. So it's coming, it's close, but we're not here yet.
Zeihan highlights that significant improvements have been made in Ukrainian air defense, resulting in over 90% of the missiles and drones that the Russians have fired not hitting their targets. This is a positive development for Ukraine, as they have been primarily targeting the power grid. However, Zeihan cautions that once it becomes apparent that the Ukrainians are going to move and that the weather is warm enough that targeting the power sector will not kill civilians, the Russians will switch their targets to facilities that are more difficult to defend. Specifically, they will target the agricultural supply chain system. Zeihan opines that the deal brokered by the Turks in the United Nations between Ukraine and Russia will lapse. This deal allows civilian bulk trade shipping vessels to get into Ukrainian ports after being searched by the Russians, load up with Ukrainian corn, wheat, sunflower, and other products, and get re-inspected on their way out to ensure that they are not smuggling anything in. The Russians have been warning for weeks, if not months, that they are backing away from the deal and that they will not be renewing it next week when it comes up for renewal. The reason for this is that they need to switch target sets. In the past, they've targeted the power grid as it is an effective way to kill people in Ukraine during the winter. However, during the summer, they will target the country's food supply chain, which will make it difficult for Ukrainians to get access to food. Zeihan explains that the Russians will target ships, ports, loading facilities, cold chain systems, silos, storage facilities, and places that build or maintain agricultural equipment. These targets are more dispersed and harder to defend, so the Russians will likely have more success. However, Zeihan cautions that this does not mean that an assault will happen before the 18th. He does not expect an assault to occur this month because of the weather. Every fall and spring, the country gets deluged, and the land is very flat and does not drain very well. As a result, until the land dries out, people and tanks cannot move unless they are on a road. Heavy equipment on a road is also at risk of getting blown up. Zeihan predicts that the Ukrainians will likely be ready by the last week of May or early June, which is traditionally when the spring mud season ends. However, he warns that the Ukrainians have been unpredictable, and in the next session, he will discuss the goals of the Ukrainian offensive.
Number one, weather wins. And if we get a wet May, then this attack is going to be pushed back not just to June, but maybe into July and even in August, and there might not be enough time to do it at scale anyway. Second, the Ukrainians have proven themselves very adept at fooling people into thinking what their actual intentions are. So for example, the Kharkiv offensive last year, which was the biggest victory for the Ukrainians of the war so far, they didn't advertise that at all. They made everybody think they were going after Kherson first, and that attack did happen, but it was really just designed to draw Russian troops away from where the Ukrainians really wanted to go, and in the end they ended up getting them both.
In the second episode of this discussion, Peter Zeihan discusses that the Ukrainian military has been using a mix of missiles, drones, and other aircraft to target fuel depots and trains, which has made it more difficult for the Russian military to move troops and equipment around the battlefield. Zeihan explains that the Russian military is designed to fight by rail and that they prefer to put their troops and equipment on rail lines as close as possible, then throw everything like a giant fist at their foes. The Ukrainian strategy, on the other hand, has always been one of movement, using superior mobility to quickly punch through the lines, get behind the Russians and partially encircle them, forcing a route where the Russians leave everything behind. Zeihan then outlines the Ukrainian plan for their upcoming spring offensive, which involves two major thrusts. The first will be a series of eastward thrusts into the Donbass region to hit the other rail connections and break up Russian formations. The second thrust will be on the east side of the Dnieper River, punching straight south through the province of Zaporizhia in order to reach the Sea of Azov. If successful, this will cut off all land and sea connections to the Crimean Peninsula, trapping the best forces the Russians have, completely devoid of reinforcements. Zeihan also cautions that weather could be a factor in delaying the Ukrainian offensive, as a wet May could push it back into June or even July, leaving little time to do it at scale. He also notes that the Ukrainians have proven themselves adept at fooling people into thinking what their actual intentions are, as seen in their successful offensive in Kharkiv province last year, where they made everyone think they were going after Kerch first, but really wanted to draw Russian troops away from where they really wanted to go.
What we're looking at here, one way or another, is an extreme breakdown of the security order. Either the Russians win, which means Ukraine ceases to exist and we're in a direct nuclear confrontation between NATO and Russia, or the Ukrainians win and neutralize Russia's ability to control large chunks of its own territory, likely heralding the disintegration of the Russian state itself, which also has nuclear connotations.
In the third episode of his video series on Ukraine, geopolitical analyst Peter Zeihan discusses the potential outcomes of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Zeihan emphasizes that the conflict is not just about Ukraine, but rather part of Russia's larger strategy of territorial expansion. He explains that Russia's territory is poor, flat, and open, which cannot support a high population density. Therefore, Russia's only strategy for security is to expand its territory beyond what it currently holds, absorbing ethnic groups along the way, including the Ukrainians. Zeihan believes that even if the Ukrainians are successful or unsuccessful in their fight against Russia, it is just the beginning of a long drawn-out conflict because the Russians see this as an existential threat. He warns that Ukraine is not the endgame for Russia and that they will continue to expand until they reach geographic barriers that are not flat and open, such as the Caucasus Mountains, Carpathians, and the Baltic Sea. This means that Russia will likely target Romania, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and possibly even Finland in the future. The geopolitical analyst emphasizes that the Russians' minimum victory is not the territories they currently hold, such as Crimea. Instead, it is to expand until they reach a geographic crustal defense that they can man with their rapidly declining demographic structure, giving them physical security. This is a different type of conflict than people have been preparing for, but for Russia, it is the minimum. They need to feel secure. Zeihan argues that the Ukrainians must go beyond liberating every inch of territory, including Crimea, if they want to prevent Russia from waging war again. To neutralize Russia's ability to control large chunks of its own territory, the Ukrainians must cross into Russia properly and neutralize two specific urban areas that serve as logistical hubs, Belgorod and Rostov-on-Don. The former is a primary artery for transporting material, men, and fuel into the northern aspects of the front, while the latter is a port city on the Don River that serves as the only logistical hub for supplying the southern front and connecting it to the greater Moscow region. If the Ukrainians succeed in neutralizing Rostov-on-Don, Zeihan believes that the Chechens in the Caucasus will likely launch a third rebellion, and this time, the Russians will not be able to easily reinforce or assault them. This could potentially lead to the disintegration of the Russian state itself, which has nuclear connotations. Zeihan concludes that the ongoing conflict in Ukraine will either result in Russia's victory and a direct nuclear confrontation between NATO and Russia, or the neutralization of Russia's ability to control large chunks of its own territory, likely leading to the disintegration of the Russian state. The geopolitical analyst warns that not enough attention has been given to what happens next if one side wins this round. However, even in the most outsized Ukrainian success this year, this will not be a problem for 2023 or 2024.